In the landscape of human sacrifice, there exists a particular kind of heroism that rarely makes headlines or receives public recognition. The quiet, daily heroism of grandparents who step forward when families fall apart, who open their homes and hearts to grandchildren in need, and who willingly sacrifice their golden years to provide stability and love for the next generation. Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom has been witness to countless stories of such sacrifice, but none quite like the one that would unfold on a humid July morning when 68-year-old Rosa Martinez would stand before his bench carrying not just a traffic citation, but the weight of choices that had transformed her from a comfortable retiree into a struggling guardian fighting to keep her family together against overwhelming odds. Rosa Martinez sat in the courthouse waiting area, her weathered hands folded carefully over the small purse that contained what remained of her monthly Social Security check after paying for groceries, utilities, and the countless expenses that came with raising 3 grandchildren on a fixed income designed for one person. At 68, Rosa should have been enjoying the peaceful retirement she had earned after 37 years of working as a seamstress in Providence's garment district, but instead she found herself starting each day before dawn to prepare breakfast for 3 children, pack school lunches, and begin the complicated logistics of managing a household that had tripled in size overnight when her daughter's addiction had made it impossible for her to care for her own children. The citation that brought Rosa to Judge Caprio's courtroom was for driving with an expired inspection sticker, a violation that carried a fine of $75 and represented yet another expense in a budget that had no room for unexpected costs. The inspection sticker had expired 3 months earlier, but Rosa had been unable to afford both the inspection fee and the repairs that would likely be required to bring her 15-year-old Honda Civic up to state standards. The car was her lifeline. Without it, she couldn't drive her grandchildren to school, get to the grocery store, or reach the various appointments that filled her days as the primary caregiver for 3 children between the ages of 8 and 14. Rosa, S. journey to that courtroom bench had begun 2 years earlier with a phone call that had shattered the quiet routine of her retirement. Her daughter Carmen, who had been struggling with opioid addiction for several years, had been arrested for possession and was facing jail time that would leave her 3 children, Maria, age 14, Diego, 11, and little Isabella, 8, without a parent or a stable home. The children's father had never been consistently present in their lives, and with Carmen unable to care for them, the choice had been between foster care placement that might separate the siblings or Rosa stepping forward to provide a home for all 3 children. For Rosa, there had been no real choice at all. These were her grandchildren, and the idea of them being separated or placed with strangers was unthinkable. She had immediately contacted social services to begin the process of becoming their legal guardian, a decision that would require her to transform her small 2-bedroom apartment into a home suitable for 4 people and stretch her limited retirement income to cover the needs of a family rather than a single person. The transition had been more challenging than Rosa had imagined possible. Her Social Security check of $1,346 per month had been adequate for her modest lifestyle as a single retiree, allowing her to pay her rent, buy groceries, cover utilities, and even save a small amount for emergencies or occasional treats. But that same income, when divided among 4 people, left no room for anything beyond the most basic necessities, and often fell short even of those. The children had come to Rosa carrying their own trauma and challenges. Maria, the eldest at 14, was struggling with anger and resentment about her mother's addiction and the upheaval it had caused in her life. She had been forced to take on adult responsibilities far too young, helping care for her younger siblings when Carmen was unable to function, and now struggled to trust that Rosa's care would be consistent and reliable. Diego, 11, had academic challenges that required extra tutoring and attention that Rosa was learning to provide, despite having no background in modern educational methods. Isabella, the youngest, suffered from anxiety and nightmares that often left her crawling into Rosa's bed in the middle of the night, seeking comfort that her grandmother was always ready to provide, despite her own exhaustion. Rosa had sold most of her few valuable possessions to pay for the deposits and fees required to move from her small apartment to a larger three-bedroom unit that would accommodate all of them. Her retirement savings, modest but sufficient for her needs as a single person, had been gradually depleted by the endless expenses of raising children: school supplies, clothing as they grew, medical co-payments, and the countless small costs that accompany active growing children. The expired inspection sticker was just one symptom of Rosa's larger financial crisis. She had been delaying the car inspection because she suspected that her aging Honda would need repairs she couldn't afford. New tires, brake work, or exhaust system repairs that could cost hundreds of dollars she simply didn't have. But without the car, she couldn't maintain the complex schedule that kept her household functioning. Dropping the children at school before riding 2 buses to her part-time job cleaning offices 3 days a week, grocery shopping at stores where she could use coupons and find the best prices, and attending the school meetings and medical appointments that were part of her responsibility as the children's guardian. The part-time cleaning job Rosa had taken was physically demanding work for someone her age, but it was the only employment she could find that offered the flexibility she needed to be available for her grandchildren. The additional income of $400 per month made a significant difference in their ability to afford groceries and basic necessities, but it also meant that Rosa was working when she should have been resting, using energy she needed to reserve for the daily demands of caring for 3 children who required emotional support as much as financial provision. Rosa's own health had begun to suffer under the stress and physical demands of her new circumstances. She had developed high blood pressure and frequent headaches that she attributed to the constant worry about making ends meet and providing the stability her grandchildren needed. Her arthritis, which had been manageable when she was living quietly alone, had worsened with the increased activity required to manage a household full of children, but she couldn't afford to slow down or seek the medical care that might help her manage her pain more effectively. The night before her court appearance, Rosa had lain awake calculating and recalculating her monthly budget, trying to find a way to afford the $75 fine without shortchanging some other essential expense. The math never worked in her favor. Every dollar was already spoken for, and finding an additional $75 would require either going without groceries for a week or skipping a utility payment and risking disconnection. But Rosa's decision to appear in court rather than simply paying the fine wasn't motivated solely by financial concerns. At 68, having worked hard all her life and now working even harder to provide for her grandchildren, she felt that her circumstances deserved to be heard and understood. She wasn't asking for special treatment, but she hoped that explaining her situation might result in a payment plan or reduced fine that would make it possible for her to fulfill her legal obligations without choosing between the fine and feeding her grandchildren. The Rosa Martinez, who prepared for her court appearance, was a woman who had learned to find dignity in sacrifice, strength in adversity, and hope in the love she felt for 3 children who had become her whole world. She dressed carefully in her best outfit, a simple navy dress she had worn to church for several years, and prepared to face Judge Caprio with the same honesty and directness that had guided her through 7 decades of life marked by hard work, family devotion, and the quiet heroism of doing whatever was necessary to protect those she loved. The Rosa Martinez, who had answered that devastating phone call 2 years earlier, had been living a quiet, predictable retirement that represented the reward for decades of hard work and careful saving. After 37 years as a seamstress, in Providence's once thriving garment district, Rosa had finally been able to stop worrying about making ends meet each month. Her small apartment was paid for, her routines were her own, and for the first time in her adult life, she had been able to focus on her own needs and simple pleasures rather than the demands of work and family obligations. Rosa's working years had been marked by the kind of steady dedication that built America's middle class in the decades following World War II. She had immigrated to the United States from Puerto Rico in 1975 at the age of 21, speaking limited English but carrying unlimited determination to build a better life for herself and the family she hoped to have someday. The garment factory where she found work was hot, loud, and demanding, but it offered steady employment and the possibility of advancement for workers who showed up every day and took pride in their craftsmanship. Over the years, Rosa had mastered every aspect of garment production, becoming skilled at operating industrial sewing machines, managing quality control, and training new employees who looked to her as a mentor and role model. Her supervisors had come to rely on her reliability and expertise, and her co-workers had appreciated her willingness to help others learn difficult techniques and navigate the complex dynamics of factory work. When the plant finally closed in 2012, a victim of overseas competition and changing economic conditions, Rosa had been one of the last employees laid off, her seniority and skills having made her valuable until the very end. The years between 2012 and her daughter's crisis in 2022 had been the most peaceful and secure of Rosa's adult life. Her Social Security benefits, combined with a small pension from the Garment Workers Union, provided enough income for her to live comfortably in her modest apartment. She had developed routines that gave structure and meaning to her retirement. Morning walks through her neighborhood, afternoon telenovelas, evening phone calls with friends and family members, and weekend visits with her grandchildren that filled her with joy but didn't exhaust her limited energy. Rosa had watched with growing concern as her daughter Carmen struggled with prescription drug addiction that had begun with legitimate pain, medication following a back injury, but had gradually consumed her life and ability to function as a parent. Carmen's addiction had followed a pattern that was tragically common: initial denial that there was a problem, followed by promises to quit that were repeatedly broken, then escalating drug-seeking behavior that included doctor shopping, prescription, forgery, and eventually street drug purchases that brought her into contact with dealers and criminal activity. The three children had suffered through years of instability as Carmen's addiction worsened, experiencing periods when their mother was functional and attentive, alternating with days or weeks when she was either incapacitated by drugs or consumed with obtaining them. Rosa had tried to help by providing financial support, babysitting services, and emotional encouragement, but she had also watched helplessly as her daughter's condition deteriorated despite multiple attempts at treatment and rehabilitation. When the call came that Carmen had been arrested and was facing jail time, Rosa's immediate concern had been for the children's welfare and stability. Maria, Diego, and Isabella had already experienced more trauma and uncertainty than children should have to endure, and Rosa was determined that they would not face the additional trauma of separation or placement in foster care with strangers, who might not understand their needs or maintain their sibling relationships. The legal process of becoming the children's guardian had been complex and emotionally draining, requiring Rosa to navigate social services, bureaucracy, family court, proceedings, and home inspections that evaluated her ability to provide appropriate care for three children. At 66, she had to demonstrate not just her love for her grandchildren, but her financial capacity to support them, her physical ability to manage their daily needs, and her emotional readiness to take on parenting responsibilities that she had thought were behind her. The transformation of Rosa's living situation had happened quickly but not easily. Her cozy one-bedroom apartment, perfect for a single retiree, had to be abandoned for a larger three-bedroom unit that could accommodate 4 people and meet the space requirements mandated by Child Protective Services. The security deposit, first month's rent, and moving expenses had consumed most of Rosa's modest savings, while the increased monthly rent had immediately strained her fixed income beyond its comfortable limits. The children's arrival had brought not just joy and love, but also chaos and expenses that Rosa had not fully anticipated. School registration required supplies, clothing, and fees that added up to hundreds of dollars. Medical appointments revealed that Diego needed glasses, and Isabella required dental work that would cost more than Rosa's monthly rent. Maria, struggling with adolescent challenges complicated by family trauma, needed counseling services that were partially covered by Medicaid, but still required co-payments and transportation to appointments across the city. The day-to-day reality of caring for 3 children while managing her own aging body and limited resources had proven more challenging than Rosa had expected. Mornings began before dawn with preparing breakfast, packing lunches, and ensuring that all 3 children were dressed appropriately and had completed their homework and gathered their school supplies. Evenings were consumed with helping with homework, preparing dinner, managing bedtime routines, and handling the emotional needs of children who were processing grief, anger, and confusion about their family situation. Rosa, quote, "S own social connections and personal routines had been necessarily sacrificed to meet her grandchildren's needs. The friends she had maintained through her retirement years saw her less frequently because her schedule was now dominated by child-related responsibilities. The simple pleasures that had filled her days, leisurely grocery shopping, afternoon rest periods, evening television programs, had been replaced by the constant activity and attention required by 3 active, needy children. The part-time cleaning job Rosa had taken was physically demanding work that left her exhausted, but it was essential income that made the difference between barely managing their expenses and falling behind on rent or utilities. 3 mornings a week, she would drop the children at school and then take 2 buses across the city to clean office buildings, scrubbing floors and bathrooms, emptying trash, and performing the kind of physical labor that was increasingly difficult for her aging body, but necessary for their financial survival. The expired car inspection represented just one of many deferred maintenance issues that Rosa couldn't afford to address, but couldn't afford to ignore. The Honda Civic was 15 years old and showing its age in multiple ways. The air conditioning no longer worked, the radio was broken, and the engine made concerning noises that Rosa hoped would not require expensive repairs. But the car was essential to her ability to manage her complex schedule and meet her responsibilities to her grandchildren, making the expired inspection both a legal vulnerability and a practical crisis. Rosa, quote, "S health had begun to suffer under the stress and physical demands of her changed circumstances. The high blood pressure that had developed required medication she struggled to afford, while the arthritis in her hands and knees made it increasingly difficult to perform the cleaning work that provided necessary income. She had postponed her own medical appointments and skipped recommended tests because the co-payments and time required would consume resources needed for her grandchildren's care. The evening before her court appearance, Rosa had sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by bills, receipts, and the small notebook where she tracked every expense, trying once again to find a way to afford the $75 fine without creating a crisis in some other area of their lives. The mathematics were unforgiving. Her Social Security and part-time work income totaled $1,746 per month, while their basic expenses for rent, utilities, food, and transportation consumed nearly $1,800, leaving no buffer for unexpected costs like traffic fines or car repairs. Despite the overwhelming financial pressure and physical exhaustion that had become her daily reality, Rosa had never questioned her decision to take in her grandchildren. When she looked at Maria, Diego, and Isabella, she saw not burdens or obstacles to her comfortable retirement, but 3 precious lives that she was privileged to protect and nurture. Their successes became her successes, their challenges became her challenges, and their future became the most important project of her life, more meaningful than any personal comfort or convenience she had sacrificed to make their family possible. "Rosa Martinez," the court clerk announced, and the 68-year-old grandmother rose slowly from her seat, her movements careful and deliberate as she gathered her small purse and the folder containing her traffic citation. As she walked toward Judge Caprio's bench, Rosa's posture reflected both the dignity she had maintained throughout a lifetime of hard work and the weariness that came from shouldering responsibilities that would challenge someone half her age. Her simple navy dress and sensible shoes spoke of someone who had dressed with care and respect for the court proceedings, despite the financial constraints that limited her wardrobe choices. Judge Caprio looked up as Rosa approached, immediately, noting the particular combination of grace and exhaustion that he had learned to recognize in elderly defendants dealing with overwhelming circumstances. Her careful movements, the way she clutched her paperwork, and the obvious effort required for her to navigate the formal courtroom setting all suggested that this was more than a routine traffic violation for someone already facing significant challenges. "Good morning, Mrs. Martinez," Judge Caprio said warmly, his voice automatically adopting the patient, respectful tone he used with elderly defendants. "Please take your time. How are you feeling today?" Rosa looked directly at the judge with eyes that reflected both appreciation for his kindness and the weight of the responsibilities she carried daily. "Good morning, Your Honor. Thank you for your patience. I am doing as well as I can, considering my circumstances." Her voice, though soft and slightly accented, carried the clear speech of someone who understood the importance of communicating respectfully in formal settings. Judge Caprio glanced at the citation before him, noting the expired inspection violation, then looked back at Rosa with increased attention. "Mrs. Martinez, I see you're here about an expired vehicle inspection. Can you tell me what happened?" Rosa took a small breath, organizing her thoughts as she prepared to explain circumstances that felt both deeply personal and overwhelmingly complex. "Your Honor, I know my car inspection expired 3 months ago and I take full responsibility for that violation, but I have been unable to afford both the inspection fee and the repairs that my old car will likely need to pass inspection." The honesty and directness of Rosa's response immediately captured Judge Caprio's interest. In his experience, most defendants began with excuses or attempts to minimize their responsibility, but Rosa was taking full accountability while also indicating that there were circumstances worth understanding. "Tell me more about your situation." "Mrs. Martinez," Judge Caprio encouraged gently. Rosa straightened slightly, drawing on the dignity that had sustained her through 7 decades of life marked by challenges and perseverance. "Your Honor, 2 years ago I became the legal guardian of my 3 grandchildren when my daughter was unable to care for them due to her addiction problems. I went from living alone on my Social Security to raising 3 children aged 8, 11, and 14. The mention of becoming a grandmother guardian immediately shifted Judge Caprio's focus, as he recognized that Rosa's story represented one of the most challenging situations faced by elderly Americans. Grandparents forced to step forward as primary caregivers when their adult children could not fulfill their parental responsibilities. "That must have been a tremendous adjustment for you," Judge Caprio observed with genuine sympathy. "How are you managing financially and practically?" Rosa's response revealed both the scope of her challenges and the strength she had found to meet them. "Your Honor, my Social Security check is $1,346 per month, and I work part-time cleaning offices 3 days a week for an additional $400 per month. This income was adequate when I was living alone in retirement, but now I need to pay rent on a 3-bedroom apartment, buy groceries for 4 people, and cover all the expenses that come with raising children." Judge Caprio felt his heart tighten as he heard these numbers and understood the impossible mathematics of Rosa's situation. Even without detailed knowledge of Providence's cost of living, he could see that less than $1,800 per month was inadequate to support a household of 4 people, especially when that household included children with educational, medical, and emotional needs. "Well, Mrs. Martinez, you mentioned that you work cleaning offices. How is that work for someone your age?" the judge asked with concern. Rosa, quote-s answer, reflected both her pragmatic acceptance of necessity and her unwillingness to complain about circumstances she couldn't change. "Your Honor, the work is hard on my body, especially with my arthritis. but it provides income we desperately need. I take 2 buses to get there after dropping the children at school, and the work keeps me busy until it's time to pick them up. The image of a 68-year-old woman taking multiple buses across the city to perform physical labor while managing the care of 3 traumatized children was clearly affecting Judge Caprio and everyone else in the courtroom who was following. Rosa's account. And your car. How important is it to your ability to manage your responsibilities? Judge Caprio asked. Your Honor, the car is essential, Rosa replied, her voice growing more urgent as she explained the central role transportation played in her daily life. Without it, I cannot drive the children to school, get to the grocery stores where I can, find the best prices with my coupons, or take them to their medical and counseling appointments. My granddaughter Isabella has anxiety from everything she's been through, and she needs therapy twice a month across town. Judge Caprio leaned forward, fully engaged in understanding the complete picture of Rosa's circumstances. Mrs. Martinez, what condition is your car in? What kind of repairs do you think it needs? Rosa's honesty about her vehicle's condition revealed another layer of her financial dilemma. Your Honor, my Honda is 15 years old and has many problems. The air conditioning doesn't work, which is difficult in summer with 3 children. The brakes feel soft, and the engine makes noises that worry me. I'm afraid that when I take it for inspection, they will find hundreds of dollars worth of required repairs that I simply cannot afford. The catch-22 of Rosa's situation was becoming clear to everyone in the courtroom. She couldn't afford the repairs needed to pass inspection, but she couldn't afford to be without the car that was essential to her ability to care for her grandchildren and maintain the income that kept their household functioning. Mrs. Martinez, Judge Caprio said gently, tell me about your grandchildren. How are they adjusting to living with you? Rosa's expression softened as she spoke about the children who had become the center of her world. Your Honor, they are good children who have been through too much trauma for their ages. My oldest granddaughter, Maria, is 14 and tries to help me, but she should be focusing on her studies, not worrying about adult responsibilities. Diego is 11 and needs extra help with school because he struggles with reading. Isabella is only 8, and she has nightmares about losing me too, so she often sleeps in my bed. The love and concern in Rosa's voice as she described each child's individual needs and challenges was evident to everyone present. Judge Caprio could hear that these children weren't burdens to her, but precious responsibilities that she had willingly accepted despite the overwhelming demands they placed on her resources and energy. How are you managing their emotional needs, along with everything else? The judge asked. Your Honor, I do my best to give them stability and love, but I worry constantly that I'm not enough for them, Rosa admitted, her voice catching with emotion. They need counseling to help them process what they've been through with their mother's addiction. But even with Medicaid, the co-payments are difficult for me to manage. I stay up at night wondering if I'm doing right by them, if I have the energy and resources they deserve. Judge Caprio felt deeply moved by Rosa's vulnerability and her obvious devotion to her grandchildren's well-being. Here was a woman who had sacrificed her comfortable retirement to provide stability for 3 children who had nowhere else to turn, and who was now appearing in court worried about a $75 fine that represented a significant portion of her monthly budget for groceries. Judge Caprio sat in profound silence for several moments after Rosa finished speaking, her words about worrying whether she was enough for her grandchildren hanging in the air like a sacred testament to the kind of selfless love that forms the foundation of human society. In his 3 decades on the bench, he had encountered countless stories of sacrifice and dedication, but there was something particularly moving about this 68-year-old grandmother who had given up her peaceful retirement to raise 3 traumatized children and was now questioning her own adequacy, despite having made extraordinary sacrifices for their well-being. When Judge Caprio finally found his voice, it was thick with emotion and filled with the kind of moral conviction that came from witnessing true heroism in the most ordinary circumstances. Mrs. Martinez, he began, his voice barely controlled as he struggled to maintain professional composure. I want you to listen to me very carefully, because what I'm about to tell you is one of the most important things I will ever say from this bench. The judge stood up, a gesture that immediately commanded the attention of everyone in the courtroom and signified that something extraordinary was about to unfold. His movement wasn't just formal protocol, it was a demonstration of respect for someone whose character and sacrifice deserved recognition and honor. Mrs. Martinez, Judge Caprio continued, his voice growing stronger with conviction, you asked whether you are enough for your grandchildren. Let me tell you what I see when I look at you. I see a woman who could have chosen the comfort and peace of retirement, but instead chose to open her home and heart to 3 children who had nowhere else to turn. I see someone who gave up financial security to provide emotional security for children who had lost everything stable in their lives. Rosa felt tears beginning to form in her eyes as she heard her sacrifices described not as burdens she had accepted, but as choices that revealed the depth of her character and love. For 2 years, she had questioned daily whether she was doing enough, whether she was capable enough, whether she was strong enough to meet her grandchildren's needs. Judge Caprio's voice rose with passion as he continued his unprecedented response to Rosa's case. Mrs. Martinez, you work 3 days a week cleaning offices at the age of 68, not because you want to, but because 3 children depend on you for food, shelter, and stability. You take 2 buses across the city to perform physical labor. That hurts your arthritis-affected body, because the income makes the difference between your grandchildren having what they need and going without. The judge paused, removing his glasses to wipe away tears that he no longer tried to hide. Mrs. Martinez, what you have done represents the highest form of human love. Sacrificial love that asks nothing in return and gives everything that is needed. Your grandchildren don't need someone perfect. They need exactly what you are providing. Someone who shows up every day, who puts their needs first, who worries about their well-being, and who loves them enough to sacrifice personal comfort for their security. The courtroom had grown completely silent as everyone present absorbed Judge Caprio's powerful recognition of Rosa's character and sacrifice. Other defendants waiting their turns, court officers, clerks, and spectators all seemed to understand that they were witnessing something far more significant than a routine traffic citation hearing. Judge Caprio returned to his seat, but continued, speaking with unprecedented emotion and determination. Mrs. Martinez, I am not only dismissing this traffic citation completely, but I am going to do something more important than that. Your car situation represents a safety issue for you, and your grandchildren and no family should have to choose between legal compliance and basic transportation needs. The judge reached into his desk drawer and pulled out his personal checkbook, a gesture that caused an audible gasp from several people in the courtroom. Mrs. Martinez, I'm writing you a personal check to cover not just the inspection fee, but also the repairs your car needs to be safe and reliable for transporting your grandchildren. Rosa stared at Judge Caprio in disbelief, unable to process what was happening. Your Honor, I cannot accept charity. I have worked hard my whole life and never taken handouts from anyone. Judge Caprio looked at Rosa with the gentle firmness of someone who understood both her pride and her need. Mrs. Martinez, this is not charity. This is community recognizing and supporting the kind of sacrifice that makes our society possible. When someone gives up their own comfort to care for children who need protection, the rest of us have a responsibility to ensure that sacrifice doesn't create impossible hardships. But Judge Caprio's extraordinary response didn't end with financial assistance. He turned to address his court clerk with specific instructions that would address Rosa's broader challenges. I want you to contact the Department of Human Services immediately and arrange for someone to meet with Mrs. Martinez to ensure she's receiving every form of assistance her family is entitled to. I also want you to call the local food bank and arrange for regular deliveries to her address. The comprehensive nature of Judge Caprio's response reflected his understanding that Rosa's problems couldn't be solved with money alone. She needed systemic support that would help her manage the overwhelming demands of raising 3 children on a fixed income while dealing with her own health issues. Furthermore, Judge Caprio continued, his voice filled with determination, I want you to contact the community college's automotive program and arrange for students to perform the necessary repairs on Mrs. Martinez's vehicle as part of their training, at no cost to her. This will give students real-world experience while ensuring that Mrs. Martinez has safe, reliable transportation. Rosa was now crying openly, overwhelmed by the scope of support being offered, but also deeply moved by Judge Caprio's recognition of her worth and dignity. Your Honor, I don't know what to say. No one has ever. Judge Caprio interrupted gently. Mrs. Martinez, you don't need to say anything except that you will accept the help you deserve. Your grandchildren need you to be healthy, safe, and supported, so that you can continue providing them with the love and stability they need. The judge came out from behind his bench and approached Rosa directly, extending his hand, not just in assistance, but in recognition of their shared humanity. Mrs. Martinez, I want you to know that you are not alone in this responsibility. This community recognizes what you have done for your grandchildren, and we want to support you in continuing to provide them with the loving home they deserve. As Rosa accepted Judge Caprio's handshake, he added quietly, Mrs. Martinez, your grandchildren are incredibly fortunate to have someone who loves them enough to sacrifice everything for their well-being. Never doubt that you are not just enough for them. You are exactly what they need, and your love is the most valuable gift they could ever receive. The standing ovation that erupted in the courtroom was spontaneous and heartfelt, with everyone present. Other defendants, court officers, clerks, and spectators rising to honor a grandmother whose quiet heroism had moved them all, and a judge whose compassionate response had demonstrated what justice looks like when it serves humanity, rather than simply processing violations. The transformation that began in Judge Caprio's courtroom that July morning rippled through Rosa Martinez's life like a gentle wave of relief and support that touched every aspect of her daily existence and fundamentally changed what it meant for her to be the guardian of 3 grandchildren who had become her whole world. As word of her extraordinary story spread through Providence and eventually across social media platforms, Rosa discovered that her quiet heroism had inspired a community response that would provide her family with the support system they needed, not just to survive, but to truly thrive. The immediate practical changes in Rosa's life began within days of her court appearance. The automotive students at the Community College of Rhode Island, supervised by their instructors, performed a comprehensive inspection and repair of her 15-year-old Honda Civic, addressing not just the issues required for legal compliance, but also safety concerns that could have created dangerous situations for Rosa and her grandchildren. The students replaced worn brake pads, repaired exhaust system problems, fixed the non-functioning air conditioning, and even addressed minor cosmetic issues that made the car look and feel more reliable and dignified. But the car repairs were just the beginning of the support network that emerged around Rosa's family. The Department of Human Services caseworker who visited her home discovered that Rosa had been eligible for several assistance programs she had never known existed. A home heating assistance program that would reduce her winter utility bills, a supplemental nutrition program that would provide additional grocery money for the children, and a grandparent caregiver support program that offered both financial assistance and respite care services. The food bank deliveries that Judge Caprio had arranged proved to be more than just nutritional support. They represented a reliable source of fresh fruits, vegetables, and protein that allowed Rosa to redirect portions of her grocery budget toward other essential expenses like school supplies, clothing, and the co-payments required for her grandchildren's medical and counseling appointments. The volunteers who delivered the food became familiar faces who checked on the family's well-being and provided additional connections to community resources. Rosa quote, S story had particularly resonated with other grandparents who were facing similar challenges as kinship caregivers, and within weeks of her court appearance, she found herself at the center of a support group that met monthly at a local community center. These gatherings provided practical advice about navigating social services systems, emotional support from people who understood the unique challenges of raising grandchildren, and most importantly, the knowledge that she was not alone in facing circumstances that could feel overwhelming and isolating. The part-time cleaning job that had been physically demanding and barely adequate to supplement Rosa's income was replaced, through community connections, with a less strenuous position, answering phones at a local pediatric clinic. The new job paid slightly more than her cleaning work, required less physical effort, and offered the added benefit of being in an environment where her experience as a caregiver was valued and her schedule could be more easily adjusted to accommodate her grandchildren's needs. 3 months after her court appearance, Rosa returned to Judge Caprio's chambers for a follow-up visit that he had personally requested to check on her family's progress. The change in Rosa was immediately apparent. Her posture was straighter, her color was healthier, and most notably, she smiled frequently during their conversation. She brought with her a handwritten letter from each of her grandchildren, thanking the judge for helping their grandmother and sharing news about their improving grades and involvement in school activities. Judge Caprio, Rosa said, presenting him with the children's letters, I wanted you to see how much better things are now. Maria made the honor roll last semester, Diego is reading at grade level for the first time, and Isabella's anxiety has improved so much that she's sleeping through the night in her own bed most nights. Judge Caprio accepted the letters with the reverence due to communications from children whose lives had been transformed by community support and their grandmother's unwavering love. Mrs. Martinez, seeing you today, seeing how your family is flourishing reminds me why I chose to work in public service. Your children are lucky to have you, but this community is also lucky to have your family as part of it. During their conversation, Rosa shared news that particularly delighted the judge. Her daughter Carmen had completed a residential treatment program and was slowly beginning to rebuild relationships with her children, with Rosa's guidance and supervision. While Carmen was not yet ready to resume parenting responsibilities, she was attending family therapy sessions and contributing financially to her children's care through a part-time job she had obtained after completing her treatment program. Rosa quote, S. Experience had also prompted broader conversations in Providence about support for kinship caregivers, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and other relatives who stepped forward when parents could not fulfill their responsibilities. The city established a dedicated support coordinator position to help kinship families navigate available resources, and local churches and community organizations expanded their programs to address the specific needs of older adults raising young children. 6 months after her court appearance, Rosa Martinez had become something of a community advocate, regularly speaking at social services offices and community meetings about the challenges faced by kinship caregivers and the importance of community support for families in crisis. Her message was always balanced, acknowledging the difficulties she had faced while celebrating the joy and meaning that raising her grandchildren had brought to her life. When people ask me if I regret giving up my comfortable retirement to raise my grandchildren, Rosa would tell audiences, I tell them that comfort is overrated, but purpose is precious. These children have given me the most important work of my life, and watching them heal and grow and succeed is worth every sacrifice I've made. Judge Caprio began incorporating Rosa's story into his speaking engagements at conferences and community events, using her example to illustrate how the justice system could serve not just legal functions but also social support functions when it recognized the humanity behind legal violations. Rosa Martinez reminded me that sometimes the most important justice we can provide isn't punishment for wrongdoing, but recognition of sacrifice and the mobilization of community support for people who are doing extraordinarily difficult but essential work. He would tell audiences of judges, social workers, and community leaders, 2 years after her court appearance, Rosa Martinez was still raising her grandchildren, but she was no longer struggling alone or in isolation. She had a network of friends, service providers, and community supporters who ensured that her family's needs were met and that her contributions to her grandchildren's lives were valued and appreciated. Maria was thriving in high school and had begun talking about college plans. Diego had overcome his reading difficulties and discovered a talent for mathematics, and Isabella had developed into a confident, happy 10-year-old whose anxiety issues were well managed with therapy and the security of her grandmother's consistent care. The expired inspection citation that had once seemed like another insurmountable problem in Rosa's overwhelming life had become the catalyst for connections, support, and recognition that had transformed not just her family's circumstances, but their sense of belonging and value within their community. Judge Frank Caprio's response to her struggles had demonstrated that true justice isn't just about enforcing laws fairly, but about recognizing the heroism that often hides behind legal violations and ensuring that society supports, rather than penalizes, those who sacrifice their own comfort to care for others. Rosa's legacy became a testament to the truth that some of society's greatest heroes are grandmothers in sensible shoes who answer phone calls that change their lives forever, who transform one-bedroom retirements into three-bedroom families, and who prove daily that love multiplied is never diminished. Her story reminded everyone who heard it that behind every legal citation there might be a human story worth hearing, and that communities flourish when they recognize and support the people who step forward to care for children who have nowhere else to turn. In her mid-70s now, Rosa Martinez continued to find energy and purpose in raising her grandchildren, sustained by the knowledge that her sacrifices had been recognized, her love had been honored, and her community had proven that no one has to face life's greatest challenges alone. The comfortable retirement she had given up had been replaced by something far more valuable: the knowledge that 3 children were safe, loved, and thriving because she had chosen to put their needs before her own comfort, and that choice had made all the difference in the world.